Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Today I wanted to talk about existential threats that we are facing as mankind. I'd like to explain to you what our plan can do to help solve the problems of existential threats. It's been, for the last maybe 20 years or so, there's been one threat after another that is causing widespread crises. And even the scientists are talking about events that have in the past wiped mankind off the face of the planet, the mass event that, like a meteorite hitting or like a global warming event, that kind of thing. So we're actually in a time period now where all the cycles from 2008 to 2012, all the cycles lined up. So let's say it's like, if you look at like a clock going around, the hands of a analog clock going around, at one point in time, all of the hands at 12 o'clock line up, and they're all together. When the cycles lined up, change is possible. So this has been a time where we're dealing with all the cycles that have lined up from the past. We've even been doing a billion-year cycle. This is the 4 billionth year, and so from that time period, when the cycles lined up, change was possible. Change only happens easily at the beginning or the end of a cycle. So we're facing like all these past events. Again, we're replaying all these events right now. So you might be able to compare like the American Revolution. We're dealing with Atlantis falling down, going down under the ocean. We're dealing with Stonehenge, 5,000 years. We're dealing with the precession of the planet, 270,000 years it takes for it to go around and be back where it started out again. So this is what's happening now. It's like the Earth is rotating or tipping at a different angle. All of these things have brought about like a series of major crises. We're looking at World War I. We're looking at Henry V, Hal, and Agincourt in the 100 Years' War. We're looking at the time of Jesus, the time of Moses, the time of all the spiritual teachers. We're looking at all of these things that are coming up to be cleared and looked at again. And because of this time period, the time with the change only happens easily at the beginning or at the end of the cycle. So, as I said, this is a time of big changes, but we can go way down or we can go way up. So it's like this, I talk about the three possible changes. We can go up and we can function on a higher level. We can take all these ideas, address them and clarify them, and then go up, like cutting us free from the past. Or we can go ignore the crises and then pass it on to future generations. When we're talking with the 1 billion year cycle, we're talking about wiping mankind off the face of the planet, because there's been we're like the fourth civilization that has been on the planet, and then the other one is to go down into the games, which is actually like a global catastrophe. So as each of these cycles have come up to be addressed, if we're not addressing them, then we're doomed to kind of like face the applications of this for centuries or millennia or hundreds of thousands of years. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to address how to address all these existential threats that we're facing. Global warming, that's a big one. How about the ocean? Well, let's see. We have the pandemics. we have global warming, we have economic crises, we have resources like, how about earthquakes and things like that? There's a YouTube channel that looks at how use of our natural resources like oil has affected the burning up all the oil in internal combustion engines has created earthquakes around the world and how they're getting worse. He can pinpoint like earthquakes and volcanoes and things like that as part of that. So if we are relying on like oil production and saying, well, it's never going to run out, well, we're facing the effects of all those things now. It's like I'm hitting a point in my life too where all of the past life things from this lifetime have caught up with me, and now I have to face them if I want to continue on. Health issues that I have to face that I have to address if I want to continue on and get older, or if I ignoring them or down, where I'm just going to say, what the heck, I might as well just let it go. Both of these lead to my death. So I have to address them, and this is where we are too as a planet. How do we address these major issues so that we can continue on and all function on a higher level? We have to address every single one of the issues. And that's where people come in, the average people come in. We've turned our lives over to the governments, and the governments are just people, just like everybody else, and they don't know how to solve problems. If we turn our lives over to somebody, eventually what happens is we go down. Okay, we have to be assuming responsibility, and this is where the spirituality has been introducing ideas. The idea of not organized religion, but spiritual people understand that we create our own reality, and if we don't like it, we have to change it. We have to figure out how to change it. So this is the topic that I wanted to address today, is how to do that on a global scale. And this is going to give people the opportunity to apply the same principles in their own life, and then get out of the crisis, and then go on to create their life on a higher level. Okay. On an individual basis, in a family level basis, industry and organizations, and companies, and then also on a national and an international level. This is where we are right now. We're going to look at certain ideas and introduce them through our government proposals. Okay, so you'll be able to address this. My screen is backwards, so I can flip it so you can read what this says. Well, maybe I can't. Well, it's going on. Anyway, what it says is track our progress. Okay, you can find this on the website, and it is for 2012. That's when I introduced the first planning for this idea, for the government proposals. We have the government proposals online, plus the planning steps and stages for each of those. It's not exactly the way that it will play out in terms of the planning process. So, but it gives people an idea of what's involved, where we get to the point where, let's say we address the overview conflict, the overview crisis, and then each step of the way, that's where our organization is going to function. We introduce the overview problem, like it's the rationale for a plan. And then we introduce an idea that solves a problem, like the solution. And it goes through, and then somebody has to agree that it's a good idea to address that. And it starts it into the planning process. So this is where we are now, is we're starting to look at like a petal of a flower head, the flower, and it goes around into the petals. And that's like the planning process. That's the application of the planning process. So, for example, we're introducing a plan for world peace. And as this rationale is the wars, all these crises and everything, we have this big mass of problems. Okay? And our government is not going to be able to solve the problem, so it's up to us. I'm talking about everybody on the planet is involved with world peace. If we want to create world peace, everybody on the planet has to participate in some way. And this is where it's going to happen, is everybody has a solution, everybody has a problem. So the idea is for everybody to come together and work together and offer these ideas. I introduce how to do that. If you know the root cause of a problem with a planning process, you can solve the problem. You can get out of the crisis. So we're introducing how to get out of this crisis. And we're looking at the overview crisis and where the problem is and what to do to solve the problem. And then we're going to, step by step, we're going to explain what got us into the crisis in the first place, what dropped us into the abyss, and then how to get out of the crisis. And that is, we are going to go step by step and pull mankind out of the crisis. And as we do that, we're going to understand on every level that is possible to solve the problems. People will start to step up and start to solve problems on a local basis, on a family basis, on a national basis, statewide basis, it doesn't matter. International basis, we're going to look at how to start solving problems. This is something that our government can't do because they don't know how to solve problems. But as people start to say, I can solve problems, then we're going to start moving into the government and start addressing things on a higher level. Okay? So the first overview crisis that we're looking at, that mankind can do something about. Now, we can't do something about where we are in the precession of the planet. We cannot actually move the planet to a different place. Hey, we'll just move it on the other side of the galaxy, and then there's no problem. We'll just kind of push it over with nuclear power. You know, it's not going to work. We have to work with where we are right now, and then take what we have, and then step by step rebuild our lives, understanding what we did wrong. If you are going to a psychiatrist, for example, you've backed yourself into a corner, you've got all these mental, physical, emotional problems, and you can't figure out how to deal with them. You're a total wreck. You have to know what got you into the problem in the first place. You have to address the core problems of this. That's where we are now. The core problems, and then we'll start to recognize where the problems are, and then how to rebuild the different ways how to come out of the crisis. Okay, when my daughter and I did the same thing. I backed myself into the corner, but everybody is in the same place. Okay, when all the cycles lined up from 2008 to 2012, everybody on the planet hit this point where everybody fell into the crisis. There isn't anybody who's not in a crisis. So as a small group of people start doing this and coming out of the crisis, then you start to demonstrate that it's possible to come out. Like Alcoholics Anonymous. You look at, before Alcoholics Anonymous, a 12-step program was instituted, for Alcoholics Anonymous. Before, what did alcoholics do? They died. And that's because they were playing a certain power game where they were relying on alcohol to make themselves feel better. Okay? People just died. They reached the point where the game stopped working, and then they weren't solving the problems, and that's when they died. So this is what we're looking at now, is how to basically overcome death, how to address the issues that lead to people's death. Okay, this is known as the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins. We're now, the first government proposal, the overview crisis that we're going to look at is the Iraq War. And if you look at Track Our Progress, this is just a brochure that I have that explains. This is what you find on the internet, on our website, that addresses Track Our Progress. Okay, this is like the government proposal, and then the planning steps, proposal, the idea addressing the rationale, and then the idea of the plan. And then down the bottom row of it is the conference in Europe, when all the world leaders come together and create the international government, which will have the understanding of all of the situations, all of them together, like all the countries will be coming together, and from their own area of expertise, like people coming together and explaining how they got out of their crisis. My organization, the independent members of my organization, were all parallel to, there are 200 of us, and right now, nobody's working together. I have an idea. Everybody just took off different directions. They say, I don't know how to do with it. It's like all the world leaders are going different directions. We know where people are. I know where people are because I know that nobody's willing to work with this. Nobody's willing to do it. But everybody's in crisis, and they have to come to the point where they understand that these two ideas going down into the power games, like you have a problem, so you're going to kill your neighbor. Hey, how about we start a civil war? How about if Donald Trump starts a civil war? Okay, is that the solution to the problem, where the schism is breaking the country apart? So let's just start a civil war and see who wins. Wars, you can't bring peace by waging war. It doesn't work. How about ignoring the crisis? How about not having a plan that addresses the root cause of the problem? That just goes down too. So these two ideas are wrong, and it comes down to the point where there's only one solution. During the American Revolution, the flag said, "Join or die." Okay? Join or die. The colonists had the opportunity to do something, if they waged war, basically, if they, on an individual basis, if they fought the British on an individual basis, they weren't going to make it. If they ignored the crisis, there's a story where Benjamin Franklin went to England and to talk to King George III, and he never got in. They would anybody who wanted to talk to the king would sit there, would come every day, and they would sit and wait, and if they weren't called to come in, hey, they just never got in. So Benjamin Franklin waited over a year to get in, and then one day one of the lords came to him and said, "Come to my estate, and I will explain to you how this works." He said, "You're not going to get in. Let me explain to you how this works." And when he was there, he was offered an opportunity to travel around the estate, and the Irishman who was there explained to him. He drove him down this road, and he saw these like stick and mud huts kind of thing. And he said, "What are those?" He said, "That's where we live." And that's when Benjamin Franklin, I read this in a book someplace, turned around and came home. He said he understood at that point in time that there was no way that if the British at the time were treating the Irish people like that, that there was no way that they were going to ever listen to the other colonists. Okay, so that's where we are now. Is we have to figure out how to overcome this idea by going up, because these two options are going to no longer be available. They're going to be two untenable options, and the only way to go up is by working together, and everybody sharing their talents and gifts, and everybody working together to create this international structure that guarantees the rights of the people. Now, the rights of the people. So why is that so important? Because the first overview crisis, it devolved, the conflict in Iraq devolved as a genocide, not a war. They couldn't figure out how to stop it, because in a genocide, the knee-jerk reaction that ends a war, makes the conflict worse. Okay, so this is what's so difficult about ending a genocide, is that it's based on weaving an illusion. Breaking through the illusion is one thing, but also ending the conflict, because the people, the knee-jerk reaction made it worse. The surge seemed to solve the problem, but it didn't. Because the ripples of effects have gone out to draw in every person on the planet. The U.S. government used that idea of a surge. George W. Bush used the idea of a surge and overwhelmed this idea. But it didn't solve the problem, because the ripples are still going out. The illusion is still going out. The war, the genocide, because it devolved, created this schism. We are seeing the effects of it now with this idea of in the United States, the reaction between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats stand on the principles, and the Republicans are grabbing for power. So it's creating a schism. We could be in a civil war before the end of Trump's administration, his term in office. Okay, how to solve that problem is we address not what's happening here right now, but we address this idea of the global genocide that's occurring, and the ripples of effects, and we start to look at this idea where we recognize the games that people are playing. Okay. A genocide, I'll go into the genocides and what causes them in my next video. Okay, but right now, the exit strategy for Iraq, the Track Our Progress, looks at all of this information. The exit strategy for Iraq helps to solve this problem too. They work together. So when you go on the website, be sure to look into that information. So on both of those. Okay, so the first one is the exit strategy for Iraq, but there are always two ideas first. So if the U.S. government just pulls out of Iraq, okay, so let's say it was a power base. The U.S. government pulls out of Iraq. Does that solve the problems? No. If you are in an accident, if you do something, if you interfere in somebody else's life, no, you're responsible for solving the problem. They have to decide, like it goes to court, it has to do all these things. So you have to assume responsibility to undo the damage you've done. And if you look at and compare this to the 12-step program, we're looking at like an alcoholic who has made a mess of his life, has gone along thinking alcohol is going to make him cool, a better driver, and all the illusion that he tries to make. He goes down into the abyss. He loses his family, he loses his home, he loses his job, not necessarily in that order, depending on what's going on. And then what happens is when he hits bottom, at some point in time, he has to say, enough is enough. He gives up. And that's when somebody else can step in and address this idea. But what we are going to do in our organization is take that same idea of a 12-step program, and we are going to do a 22-step program. And that's what this planning does. It starts to address the planning idea, a 22-step program that allows people not to just get out of the crisis, but to go on and create the life they've always wanted, like they keep on going up. Okay, now, the first step is, so there's two government proposals. Now, stepping back from that for just a minute, I wanted to say that the U.S. government, hey, we're Americans, we're pretty proud of our government, you know, we're good people, we're fine people, we're generous, we're helping people, but we play a lot of power games. We're a Christian nation, predominantly a Christian nation, and Christian nations, the power game that Christians play is to wage war, like the Crusades. Hey, we're a Christian nation. We understand planning, but at the same time, if you look at the faith of the pure, you'll understand how Christianity and Islam create a sense of competition. It has people stand up and protest, and then if the Christians, that's Islam, and if if you don't listen to the plan, if you don't come up with a plan that benefits everyone, then it creates a lot of dissension between the two. If you don't listen to what they say, that's what leads to terrorism and war. So we're looking at how the Iraq conflict why it wasn't resolved, why they weren't able to stop it. We're looking at this idea. But so the two come together is that the exit strategy for Iraq, but the United States, by invading a country, and that was sovereign country, we broke international law. And now what we have to do is we have to understand what we did wrong. It put us into the abyss. All these ripples are going off. It created a schism across the world. And now what we have to do is understand what we did wrong, and then we have to work to undo the damage that we've done. So by denying the Iraqi people their unalienable rights to live their life without interference, we lost our unalienable rights. We Americans are no longer one country under God, indivisible under God. If we are under God, we are indivisible. Okay? We cannot be divided if we are under God, standing on God's principles, with liberty and justice for all. We are not doing that. We are not standing on those principles. But what we have is we have like 60 different failed foreign policies that we're going to be looking at. Each one of these government proposals is based on failed foreign policy. So what are we doing wrong? What are we going to do? We are going to turn ourselves inside. The United States is a melting pot of all the different cultures and religions. People have come together and from all over the world thinking this is a place of prosperity, this is where we have our rights and such. And they get there and go, this is not what I signed on for. This is not what I expected. And that's because at the end of the cycle, it's like let's say we're moving out of this old cycle of all the stuff that we don't want in our lives anymore. And now we're coming into the new, and we're going to decide what we want. This is this. When people stand up and protest about what we don't want, our government has to start listening, because the power a government has is derived from the people. We have to stand up and protest, but we have to have a plan. We have to explain where it is, and we have to keep solving these problems ourselves, and then that will bring in the government. Okay? And I'll go into all this in other books. In fact, our books explain all this. Okay, so the two ideas first are the exit strategy for Iraq. The U.S. government has to figure out how to get out of Iraq, but we also have to assume responsibility for what we've done. For us to get out of this overview crisis, this is a global genocide that's devolving right now. The schism, the ripples of effects, economic ripples and things like that have gone out. Economic crisis in the family, conflict resolution. Donald Trump has gone in and he's playing the same power games that George Bush played, but this time they're on steroids. Okay, we are seeing, if you go ahead sometime and compare George W. Bush's policies, his term in office, with everything that Donald Trump is doing, and you'll see that it's the same thing but on steroids. And Barack Obama wasn't able to solve this problem. So we have now a new administration coming in, the Biden administration, and he's talking about unifying people, but does he know how to unify people? Is he going to be able to address all the root causes of the problems, or is he going to solve the problem? So what we have to do is, the one thing he needs to do is to allow us to have a voice and to keep introducing this information and saying, okay, we know how to solve these problems. We're average people who solve these problems all the time. How do you solve the problem of a global genocide? The same problems happen on every level. So if you've ever been divorced, for example, and you might had a romantic relationship with somebody and it turned really bad, it turned into a hostile relationship, hey, that can be turned into where somebody's turning people against you. You're one of the people is turning people against you, that's a character defamation campaign. That is, what a genocide is like. Okay? If somebody is lying about you and telling all these lies about you, what is the truth? How do you defend yourself? Okay, so we're looking at all of these problems. Now, as we solve these problems and we address the root cause of this problem, that's like an overview idea. But as we go through and recreate this international government, we're bringing in all the people to start solving problems. And with shared research, the problems will be solved. We may not be able to deal with where the Earth is in its revolution around the center of the galaxy. We can't solve that problem. No, but what we can do is we can address all the issues that are making life much different for us, much harder for us, and that is like fracking, the use of oil that is, coming up with an alternative to burning oil in internal combustion engines. Or how about the technology related to cell phones and lithium batteries and things like that? How about undersea mining? Hey, sounds like a really good idea, but what happens if it's causing problems? It's not the root cause of the problems. How do we solve global warming? Okay, so how do we come up with technology that actually will help the problem instead of making the problem worse? Okay, we're going to come up with solutions to all these ideas, and that's all that's going to be found in these project levels that are associated with each. It's like each government proposal will have a project level. I'm still kind of working on this. So the first ones are very clear to look at. So just allow the final ones to kind of like be addressed, because I'm by myself and coming up with information. I'm a psychic, and I came up, the spiritual hierarchy gave me the how to do this, but then it's up to me to use my own talents and gifts to figure out how everything fits in and to come up with a plan, because they told us how to, not what to do, but how to do it. And then it's up to us to make the effort to do that. So this is where we are right now as a world. We're looking at the overview idea right now. The overview idea solution is the international government, because what it'll do, the principle that's lacking with a genocide, the one principle that's lacking is our rights, our liberty. In fact, have you ever noticed in those old French movies about the revolution, they always wrote libertad on the outside of the walls, liberty, 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 because it was like a genocide that was being perpetrated on people. They felt they had the right to kill people. They would take people out of their homes and kill them on the guillotine. So that was a genocide that was devolving. It wasn't a civil war, it was a genocide. Because of that, they knew that the principle was their rights, their unalienable rights from our Creator. Okay, so we're looking at the power games that are played. We're looking at this, but the game that triggered this was the Iraq War was an act of revenge against Saddam Hussein, and that brought together 5 power games. And we're looking at where power comes from, where true power comes from. Does it come from having a bigger military? Being able to bring in all the coalition countries and offering them, offering them the opportunity to have piece of the action, whatever it was. We don't know what everything was offered to them. So now what we're doing is we're looking at this overview idea. Will the government, the U.S. government, agree to assume responsibility for pulling out of Iraq? Not a surge, but to take this to court. Because the courts, if nobody will stand up and defend you in a character defamation campaign, then it's up to the courts to do that. And that's why the first principle associated with a fair trial is the principle of equality. We're looking at what causes all the ripples of effects, including famines and economic crisis and terrorism and things like that. We're going to look at that in our technology segment in one of our inventions. We have a free power source invention. Excuse me. Sorry. So this is a very big subject we're looking at right now. We're looking at how to solve the existential threats that are causing problems. How to solve a pandemic. How do you solve a pandemic? A global pandemic. Is it a vaccine? Is that the solution? Is that up, down, or straight ahead? I'll tell you what, where pandemics come from, and I've already covered this in one of my other videos, okay? The pandemic basically is not going to be resolved with vaccines, because right now the Spanish flu was resolved with a vaccine, and we're still dealing with the effects of the Spanish flu right now as one of the ones that keeps coming back. What causes that to come back? Okay? So we're going to look at everything associated with this. We're going to have newsletters that explain all this, that carry mankind, start out with a rationale and address each of these issues and goes all the way to the end of the crisis. You start out by reading it and understanding everything associated with that, and then you have it all in your hands, all the way from the beginning to the end. You can apply the same information in your own life. We're going to unravel, we're going to address all the problems associated with because we're an overview country, all of our failed policies. We're going to allow each of those countries that we've oppressed, we're going to allow each of them to solve their problems, and then we're going to address this idea that we'll all meet at the international government at the conference in Europe. And that's where we start right now, is the understanding that there's going to be a conference in Europe hosted by our organization. We have government proposals that it's not going to be the world leaders who come in and sit down. It's not going to be the United States government saying, we are the most important and powerful nation on the planet, and you have to listen to us, otherwise we're just going to come in and we're going to topple your government. It's not going to be that way. It's going to be our organization introducing solutions, addressing the root cause of the problems of each of our failed policies, and then we're going to cut those nations free to be able to be sovereign nations, and then as that happens, then the entire world will be functioning on a higher level. Okay, it's a conference in Europe, and then our organization, we will host it, and then we will step out. We will address all of these principles. Each of the nations will be an advocate for the solution, and then when they come, they will stand there and they will have demonstrated the potential of what they have and who they are. I'm one individual. I'm an overview idea, but I'm a very average person. I have absolutely no power. So power comes from assuming responsibility. And when you assume responsibility and you work to undo the damage and you offer solutions and it's already in existence, your plan has to be in existence for people to hear it and to accept the plan. So will they accept if Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping or all three of them together decide they are going to come together and to create an international government with the three of them in power instead of the UN, where there's 5 nations that are the permanent members of the Security Council, and they're kind of like have more power than these people do because they're just temporary or not even on the Security Council. So what happens if the UN is not fair and a global war is also not fair? Not fair to anybody. So is it 3 nations that are taking over and telling everybody what to do? based on the idea of we're going to take your resources, we're going to take everything we've got, we're going to move in and topple your government, we're going to make you a satellite nation of of Russia, the Russian Federation. Okay, do you want to be that, or do you want to have a sovereign nation that is going to be based on its culture, and each culture is going to function on a high level? Eventually, there's going to be 500 countries, and they're all going to based on cultures, and they're going to be all sovereign, and they're all going to be functioning on a very high level. So, what is it that you would like to do? Would you like to join the point where Vladimir Putin, how about Donald Trump has been asking for Russian interference or Chinese interference so that he can win the election, and he's going to turn us over to a satellite nation of a Russian, bring them in, and they're going to move in like they've done into other countries like Chechnya and Ukraine and other ones. Okay, do we want that? I don't. I'm an American. I don't like that idea. I'm an American, but I'm also a citizen of the universe, and I believe in universal law that considers everybody to be equal. Everybody to have the opportunity, the equality, the capacity, and the opportunity to create the life we want. That's where I stand, and that's what I uphold. So, which are you going to be involved with? The one where everybody is equal and conflicts are settled in court, or a court system, not a kangaroo court? Or one of the other ones where we're not solving the problems and passing them on to future generations, and it's going to take 1 billion years to solve all these problems? Or we're going to wipe mankind off the face of the planet because we're not solving problems like global warming? Are you ready to move up to where the North Pole is and fight over a salmon so that you can survive? How about we start solving the problems now? If the ship is going down, it's time to get off before it's underwater. It's time to step off the sinking ship and to come up with a solution that allows everybody to survive and everybody to function on a higher level. Many people will die over this time period from these problems. People who just came in with the idea that they were going to help carry it forward a little bit, and then they're going to do their part and let go. But the people who are there, my generation, like I said, I'm old enough now. I understand the power games, but by me understanding the games and me battling with the games and saying enough is enough, then it's time for me. The time will come. Well, I will let go too, and I'm going to pass it on. The legacy that I leave is going to be world peace, and I'm inviting everybody to participate with me too. When the international government comes together, as we address all these things, the international government will have the capacity to solve the problems like pandemics, future problems as it comes up, and we'll address all of these ideas in over the next 10 years or so. So I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll share this information with other people. Let other people know what's happening. Join the debate. Be part of this. Be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. Don't say we have to kill other people because we're not going to let anybody interfere in our lives. We don't have to do that. This is where we are. We work on this idea that benefits everyone. Then what we do is we put on a kind of armor around ourselves that protects us from what other people are doing. Okay, now that last thing is share it, and then subscribe, and then make sure you keep in touch. Make sure you're always part of this debate. Join it and share with other people. Okay, that's enough for right now. Thank you for listening.